I'd told myself I was too old for Halloween. 23, living on my own, rent due every month. Hardly the sort of life where you carve pumpkins and hang fake cobwebs across the porch. But when the night came round and the street outside filled with orange light and laughter, something in me twitched with the same childish itch. It was just gone 9, mist thick enough to blur the lampposts. I sat by my living room window with a can of lager sweating in my hand, watching kids scurry from door to door. Across the narrow garden fence stood Mr. Hartley's house. Same as always. Blinds half drawn. No sign of life except the soft amber glow of a lamp in his front room. He fascinated me, though I'd never admit that to the lads. 45, maybe older. Always neat, collar pressed even when mowing the lawn. He spoke with that slow, careful politeness of someone used to living alone. I'd once helped him carry shopping from his car. He'd thanked me with a small, awkward smile. And that was that. No parties, no visitors, no lights at Christmas except one lonely string in the window. So of course he became the butt of every joke in our group chat. Bet he's got bodies in the cellar, Josh had texted earlier. You should go check, Jamie. Scare him a bit. Half a can later. It sounded like a brilliant idea. I rummaged through the box under my bed and found the plastic mask I'd worn years ago at a uni party. A cracked, white skull with a rubber band that always snapped your hair. Add a black hoodie and some jogging bottoms and I'd pass for a budget ghost. The mirror made me laugh. The eye holes were too small, the grin too wide. Still, it did the job. The plan was simple. Sneak round the back, knock on his kitchen door, jump out when he opened it. Stupid, harmless fun. Maybe it'd make him laugh, or at least give me a story to tell. Outside, the cold bit instantly. The air smelled of wet leaves and faint wood smoke. Fog rolled low over the pavement, curling round my ankles like something alive. Every sound, the crunch of gravel, the creak of the gate, seemed louder in the quiet. Mr. Hartley's house loomed darker than I'd expected. Curtains drawn on the front, but the back, I noticed, was half open. A rectangle of warm light spilled onto the patio. I hesitated, pulse quickening. This was the point where a sensible person would turn round. But I wasn't sensible. Not tonight. I crept down the narrow path between our gardens, heart hammering behind the cheap plastic of the mask. Somewhere in the distance, a group of teenagers shouted and laughed. Fireworks cracked open the sky, and then silence again. My breath fogged the mask's inside, making everything damp and claustrophobic. I reached the back fence, low enough to climb, though it groaned when I swung a leg over. I landed softly on the other side, crouched low. The open window above the sink glowed gold. I could hear faint music playing, something classical. A piano piece, maybe. I edged closer, peering through the glass. At first, all I saw was the reflection of the light on the counter. Then movement. Mr. Hartley stepped into view. He was wearing a white shirt, sleeves rolled up, dark trousers. Then he unbuttoned the shirt and slid it off his shoulders, folding it with that same precise care he used for everything. My mouth went dry. He looked older than I'd imagined, yes, but strong. The kind of build that comes from years of real work, not gyms. I knew I shouldn't be watching, but something pinned me there, caught between curiosity and the weird prickling guilt of seeing someone you shouldn't. He turned slightly, reaching for something on the table. A long black coat, maybe part of a costume. A cape. A pair of fangs lay beside a glass of wine. I almost laughed. The man I thought hated fun was about to dress as a vampire. Then he glanced toward the window. Our eyes met. His bare chest, the dim kitchen light, my stupid skull mask half hidden behind the glass. For a second, neither of us moved. Then everything happened at once. He froze. I jolted backward, knocking into the fence. My foot caught on a flower pot. It clattered over, spilling soil. The mask slipped, hanging by one ear. "Who's there?" His voice carried out, low but sharp. Panic flared through me. "Sorry, it's Jamie, from next door." I ripped the mask off, heart thundering. The back door swung open, and there he stood, shirt half on, confusion written across his face, hair slightly mussed. "Jamie?" he said again, slower this time. It was a prank," I blurted, holding up the mask like evidence. "Just a stupid Halloween thing. Didn't mean to, spy." For a long moment he just stared. Then, to my surprise, he laughed. Not loud, but warm, like the sound of something cracking open after years of silence. "A prank, was it?" he said. "You gave me quite a start. I'm sorry, Mr. Hartley. I didn't—" "Oh, drop the mister. It's just Hartley. Come in before you freeze to death." I hesitated at the door, embarrassment burning through the adrenaline. But his expression wasn't angry, more amused than anything. So I stepped inside. The kitchen smelled faintly of red wine and rosemary. Candles flickered on the table, their wax pooling like melted moonlight. I realized my shoes were leaving damp prints on his tiled floor. "Sit down," he said, nodding to a chair. "If you're going to haunt people, you should at least accept a drink afterwards." I managed a weak laugh, dropping the mask onto the table. The cracked skull stared up at me, ridiculous and accusing. As he poured 2 glasses of wine, I caught my reflection in the window, half hidden by mist and candlelight. The faint outline of the mask beside it. I looked like 2 people at once. The prankster and something else entirely. I didn't know it then, but that silly bit of plastic would end up meaning more than I could imagine. I hadn't planned to stay. After the mask mishap and the flower pot disaster, most people would have bolted and never mentioned it again. But something about the way Hartley laughed, low, genuine, like he hadn't done it in years, kept me rooted there, sitting awkwardly at his kitchen table with the world's worst Halloween prop between us. He slid a glass of red wine across the table. "It's not poisoned," he said dryly. I took it, still flustered. "Didn't think it was. Just a bit embarrassed, that's all." "As you should be," he replied, but his eyes softened. "Though I'll admit, I haven't had company on Halloween for a long while." That surprised me. "You don't get visitors? Not the kind who turn up wearing skull masks, no." A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Usually just the postman." The silence stretched for a moment, comfortable in a strange way. The house was warm, too warm after the fog outside, and the faint music from his radio drifted through, an old jazz tune with crackling static. I studied him properly then. His hair was flecked with gray at the temples, but his face, lined though it was, had that sort of calm strength that comes from living through enough storms to know they all pass eventually. He was still half-buttoned from earlier, and I looked away before I lingered too long, pretending to sip my wine. "Sorry again," I mumbled. "I didn't mean to, you know." "See anything?" He arched a brow, amused. "You mean you didn't mean to peer through my window like a horror film extra?" "Exactly that." "Well," he said, leaning back, "I was hardly decent, so we're even." I nearly choked on the wine. He laughed quietly and poured himself more. The conversation drifted to safer topics. Work, the town, how miserable the weather had been lately. But the more we talked, the more I noticed little things. The way he listened properly, not just waiting for his turn to speak. How his hands moved when he talked, deliberate but gentle. How he seemed half surprised by his own laughter. At one point, the fog outside thickened, pressing its pale face against the window. The candle on the table flickered, and for a second the whole room glowed like a painting. 2 figures caught in gold and shadow. "You know," he said quietly, "I used to love Halloween as a child. The costumes, the mischief. Then life gets complicated." "Yeah," I said. "Feels like everyone else kept the fun and we got stuck paying council tax instead." That earned another small smile. "Quite." He stood and fetched something from the counter. A long black coat and a small plastic packet. "This was my costume," he said. "A vampire. I'd planned to surprise a few friends, but they canceled last minute. I suppose I could wear it for the cat," I laughed. "You've got a cat?" "She's selective with her appearances. Bit like me." He draped the coat over a chair and unsealed the packet. Inside were a pair of novelty fangs and some cheap fake blood. "Not very convincing, is it?" "It's decent," I said. "You've got the look for it." He gave me a skeptical glance. "Is that so?" "Yeah," I said before I could stop myself. "You've got the presence, I guess." The words hung between us, heavier than they should have been. He looked at me, properly looked. And I felt that same odd flicker in my chest that had started when I saw him through the window. Confusion, interest, something nameless. To hide it, I gestured to the window. "You keep that open a lot?" "Must be freezing." "I like the air," he said simply. "And it lets me see out. Reminds me the world's still there." That struck me harder than I expected. There was something quietly lonely about it. Him standing here, year after year, watching the same streetlights fade into mist. We talked for a while longer, the conversation meandering from music to travel to how neither of us really liked fancy parties. Time slid by unnoticed. Outside, the laughter of trick-or-treaters had faded to distant echoes. Only the occasional pop of a firework broke the stillness. At one point, I caught my reflection in the window beside his. The fog blurred everything, but our outlines were clear. His taller, steady, mine half turned toward him. We looked absurdly, like 2 people in the same world yet separated by glass. The thought unsettled me in a way I couldn't name. "You're a curious one, Jamie," he said after a pause. "Why's that?" "You came here to scare me. And yet you look like the one who's been frightened. I laughed under my breath. Maybe I was. I thought I had you figured out, and then you found me dressing like a gothic villain, he finished. Something like that. He tilted his head, studying me with quiet amusement. People see what they want through windows. Sometimes the truth isn't half as dramatic. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I agreed. Sometimes the truth could be more dramatic than anything imagined. Eventually I stood to leave. I should, probably head back. My mates will think I've fallen into a grave or something. Hartley followed me to the door. Thank you for the laugh, he said, and for reminding me that Halloween still exists. I'll try to keep future pranks less invasive, I said with a grin. He held the door open, the warm light spilling out into the mist. You're welcome to stop by again, Jamie. Preferably without the mask next time. I nodded, but my mind snagged on the last thing I saw before stepping out. My reflection layered over his in the window pane. Me outside. Him inside, two versions of the same night looking in opposite directions. Back in my flat, I set the mask on the counter. The cheap plastic grin stared up at me, warped by the lamplight. I thought about the warmth of his kitchen, his laugh, the way he'd looked at me when I said he had presence. I couldn't explain why my chest felt tight or why I kept glancing at the window as if expecting to see his light still on. But I knew, even then, that something had shifted. Something small but certain, like the quiet click of a latch turning on a door I hadn't realized was there. The storm came down heavier than expected. The first crack of thunder startled both of us, and within seconds the house was plunged into darkness. Only the faint orange glow of the jack-o'-lanterns by the window and a single candle on the table kept the room from disappearing entirely. Rain pounded against the glass, wind whistled through the old chimney, and somewhere, a shutter banged. Brilliant, Hartley muttered, rummaging through a drawer until he found more candles. He lit one after another, and the room came alive with soft, flickering light. Shadows danced across the walls, bending and swaying like ghosts trying to join us. I sat on the sofa, arms crossed, trying to laugh off the eerie mood. Guess we're stuck here till it passes. Wouldn't be the first time this house has seen a power cut, Hartley said, setting a candle near me. His face looked different in the glow, softer somehow, more open. His eyes caught the flame and turned amber gold. I'd never noticed that before. He settled into the armchair opposite me, stretching his legs out with a content sigh. Might as well make the best of it. We did. For a while, we just talked. Small things at first. Work, weather, how the jack-o'-lanterns were already drooping. But as the storm deepened, so did the conversation. Something about the dark made it easier to speak honestly. Hartley told me about his younger years, how he'd left home too early, how he'd spent his 20s trying to prove himself to people who never really cared. I thought success would feel like freedom, he said quietly, watching the flame tremble. But sometimes it just feels like noise. You ever feel that? I nodded before thinking. All the time. He looked at me with mild surprise, then curiosity. It's like I hesitated, fingers fidgeting with the edge of a cushion. Everyone around me seems to know where they're going. I keep trying to catch up, but I'm not even sure what I'm chasing. Feels like I'm wasting time. Hartley leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You're young, Jamie. You're supposed to feel lost. I'm 24, I said. Feels late to still be figuring things out. He gave a short, warm laugh. I'm 39, and I'm still figuring things out. Something in his tone, gentle, self-deprecating, oddly comforting, made me smile. The thunder rolled again, longer this time. A gust of wind slipped under the door, sending the candle flame into a shiver. The temperature dropped. Without really thinking, Hartley stood and fetched a blanket from the hallway. He tossed it onto the sofa beside me. Here, he said. You'll freeze otherwise. I thanked him and draped it over my legs. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, just quiet, almost thoughtful. He returned to his chair but didn't sit back as far this time. We talked more. About movies, music, the kind of people we used to be before life made us grow up too quickly. Sometimes our laughter filled the whole room, and other times we'd trail off mid-sentence, letting the silence linger longer than it should have. It was in those moments that I became aware of things I hadn't noticed before. The way he looked at me when I spoke. How his mouth curved in that small, knowing half-smile, or the way his voice softened when he said my name, like he didn't even mean to. Jamie. It sounded different in the dark, warmer, deeper, and maybe I imagined it, but when our eyes met, I felt a pull. Subtle. Unsettling. Familiar in a way that made my chest tighten. I quickly looked away, pretending to study the flame. My thoughts scattered like leaves in the wind. He's a man. He's older. I'm straight. The words felt like a shield, but a weak one. "Your turn," he said, pulling me back. "You told me where you are. Tell me where you want to be." I laughed softly. "You sound like a therapist." "Maybe I missed my calling," he teased, but his eyes were kind. I shrugged. "I don't know. Somewhere quieter, maybe? Doing something that feels like mine." "Like what?" I thought for a while. "Something creative, I guess. Something where I don't feel like I'm pretending to be someone else all the time." Hartley nodded slowly, as if he understood more than I'd said. "Then stop pretending," he said simply. The words hit harder than I expected. For a second, I couldn't look at him. The candlelight wavered again, and our faces flickered in and out of shadow. His expression was unreadable, steady, patient, but there was something else there too. Something unspoken. When our hands brushed as I reached for the mug on the table, neither of us moved. Just a second, no more. But it left a spark behind, faint but undeniable. I cleared my throat. "Sorry," he smiled faintly. "Don't be," and that was all. But my heart was already beating faster, like I'd done something forbidden. I tried to focus on anything else. The rain, the thunder, the shape of the candle's flame. But my thoughts kept circling back, to his voice, his hands, the way he looked at me like he could see straight through every wall I'd built. He started telling another story, about the first house he ever bought, how the roof leaked so badly he had to keep a bucket in the hallway. His laugh echoed warmly through the room, and I found myself watching his mouth instead of listening to the words. The curl of his lips when he smiled, the faint line of stubble across his jaw. I caught myself and forced my gaze away, cheeks heating. What was wrong with me? Outside, the storm grew louder. Lightning flashed through the window, throwing his face into brief, startling clarity. His eyes, his lips, the quiet ease of someone who didn't need to prove anything anymore. Then, darkness returned, and all I could see was the candlelight again. "Power might be gone till morning," he said eventually, leaning back. "You can take the guest room if you like. Safer to stay put." I hesitated. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "Can't have you driving in this." Something in his tone, gentle but firm, made the decision for me. "All right," I said quietly. For a while, neither of us moved. The storm outside seemed to steady into a rhythmic downpour. The silence between us deepened again, charged now with something neither of us dared name. Hartley stood and walked to the window, checking the locks. His reflection shimmered faintly against the glass, surrounded by candlelight. "Nights like these make the house feel alive," he said softly. I watched him. The line of his shoulders, the way his hair fell forward as he leaned. "Yeah," I murmured. "It does." He turned, caught my gaze, and for a heartbeat neither of us looked away. Then he smiled, just a small, tired smile, and blew out one of the candles. The shadows deepened. "Come on," he said, voice low. "You should get some rest." But as I followed him down the hallway, the thought hit me. Something had shifted. I couldn't name it yet. Couldn't even admit it to myself. But it was there, pulsing beneath the surface like an ember waiting for air. When he opened the door to the guest room, I caught a whiff of cedar and smoke, the scent that always seemed to follow him. He handed me an extra blanket, his fingers brushing mine again. Just a simple touch, innocent, and yet it lingered. "Good night, Jamie," he said, voice quiet but steady. "Good night," I managed, though the word came out softer than I meant it to. He hesitated at the doorway. For a moment, I thought he might say something else, but he only nodded and closed the door behind him. The storm carried on outside, steady and relentless. I lay there staring at the ceiling, the faint candlelight flickering against the wall. Every sound of the rain reminded me of the silence that had stretched between us downstairs. How close it had felt. How dangerous. I should have felt relieved to be alone again. Safe. But I didn't. Instead, I felt the echo of his voice in my chest, the warmth of his nearness still clinging to me like static. Something had changed tonight, and I wasn't sure I wanted it to change back. The rain hadn't stopped. It came in steady sheets through the night, a dull percussion against the windows. I'd managed to doze off for a while, but the sound woke me again, along with the faint creak of a floorboard outside my door. I turned my head toward the noise. Soft footsteps, then a hesitant knock. "Jamie?" Hartley's voice came low and uncertain. "Yeah?" I sat up, running a hand through my hair. "Sorry, didn't mean to wake you. Power's still out and, well, I thought I'd check you hadn't frozen to death." I smiled despite myself. "Still breathing?" He chuckled and then, after a pause, said, "Can I come in?" Something in his tone, gentle, almost cautious, made my chest tighten. "Yeah, sure." The door opened, and the warm glow of his candle spilled in, stretching shadows across the walls. He stepped inside, barefoot, the sleeves of his jumper pushed up. His hair was mussed, and he looked softer somehow, the sharp edges smoothed by the hour. "Couldn't sleep," he admitted, closing the door behind him. "The storm's too loud." He crossed to the chair by the window, setting the candle down on the small desk. Its flame flickered, reflecting faintly in the glass panes beside him. For a moment neither of us spoke. "You all right?" I asked finally. He nodded, but it wasn't convincing. "Yeah, just thinking about what?" He glanced up, and the way he looked at me made it clear he wasn't sure if he wanted to answer. But then he sighed, leaning back in the chair. "Fear, I suppose." "Fear?" "Not of storms," he said, smiling faintly. "Or ghosts, just of being misunderstood. Of being alone too long. Of letting people in, only for them to decide they don't like what they find." His words hung between us like a weight. I didn't move, afraid that if I did, the moment might shatter. "I've been single for a while," he went on, eyes fixed on the candle. "Years, really. Not because I wanted to be, but because after a certain point you get tired of trying. I used to think there was someone out there who'd see me, really see me, and not flinch. But that sort of hope starts to feel childish after a while." There was something raw in the way he said it, the kind of honesty people usually hide behind jokes or silences. I swallowed. "Someone hurt you?" He smiled, a quiet, wistful thing. "Not one person, no, just enough little moments to make you doubt if you're worth the risk. People like the idea of me until they realize what that means." He didn't have to spell it out. I understood, and suddenly the room felt smaller. The candlelight trembled like it could sense the shift in the air. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "Don't be." His voice stayed calm, steady. I made my peace with it, most days, but his eyes said otherwise. I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat tightened. Instead, I stared at the unlit lantern on the desk beside him. Its glass was dusty, untouched. The kind of thing you forget about until the power goes out and you need light, something waiting to be illuminated. "I get it," I said at last, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked at me, one eyebrow raised. "Being misunderstood," I said. "Feeling like you don't quite fit where you're supposed to. Like you're always pretending." Hartley leaned forward slightly, interest flickering in his gaze. "That how you feel?" "Sometimes," I admitted, "more than I like to." "Even around your friends?" "Especially around them." He smiled faintly, almost sadly. "Guess we've both gotten good at pretending." We sat in silence again, the kind that wasn't empty but full, of words we didn't know how to say. The storm outside had softened to a whisper, but inside, everything felt louder. "I don't know why I'm telling you all this," I said finally. "Trying to laugh it off, because it's late," he said gently, "and because sometimes it's easier to be honest when no one's supposed to be listening." He wasn't wrong. The candle's flame flickered higher for a moment, throwing his face into sharper relief. The faint lines near his eyes, the way his mouth curved, not in a smile, but in something more fragile. "I've never felt this kind of connection before," I said quietly. "Surprising even myself." Hartley's eyes widened slightly. "With me?" I nodded, staring down at my hands. "It's strange. I've known people for years and never felt this. And now, in one night..." I stopped, shaking my head. "It scares me more than any ghost story ever could." For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then Hartley exhaled, slow and deep. "You don't have to explain it, Jamie." "But I want to," I said quickly, looking up. "Because I don't even know what it is. I keep trying to name it. Curiosity, comfort, but it feels real. And that's what scares me." His gaze held mine, steady, searching. "You don't have to decide what it means tonight." The words were kind, but there was a tremor beneath them, something unguarded. He stood, almost hesitantly, and came to sit beside me on the edge of the bed. The candlelight pooled between us, painting everything in gold and shadow. "I don't want you to feel pressured," he said. "Not by me, not by this." "I don't," I whispered. "That's the thing. I feel..." I trailed off, unsure how to finish. "Safe?" he offered. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, safe." The silence that followed was electric. We were close enough that I could see the flecks of color in his eyes, the way his breath caught as he exhaled. My heart was thudding so hard I could hear it. He looked down at my hand resting on the blanket. His fingers twitched, just once. The space between us felt impossibly small, and I knew, if either of us moved even a fraction closer, something would break open. But we didn't. We just sat there, caught in the fragile stillness between want and restraint, between truth and the fear of it. Hartley smiled, the faintest trace of sadness in it. Funny thing, he murmured. People spend all their lives chasing moments like this, and when they finally get one, they're too scared to let it happen. His words hit something deep inside me. I felt like he'd just said everything I couldn't. Maybe that's because the real ones, I said softly, don't need to happen. You just... No, our eyes met again, and this time, neither of us looked away. The candle flickered, threatening to die out, but it didn't. Its glow steadied, gentle and unwavering. Hartley reached out, not to touch, just to brush his fingers against the edge of the blanket near mine. A breath's distance, enough to make the air feel charged. Jamie, he said quietly, almost like a prayer. Yeah? He shook his head faintly, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Nothing. Just, thank you, for not running. I wouldn't even know where to go, I said, and we both laughed softly. The kind of laugh that feels like release. The storm outside was almost gone now. Its rage faded to a distant murmur. The candle burned lower, and the shadows began to still. We stayed like that, side by side, saying nothing more. Just breathing. There was no need for words. The silence spoke for us, fragile but full of meaning. When the candle finally sputtered out, the room fell into darkness. But for the first time that night, it didn't feel lonely. Because somewhere between tricks and truth, something inside me had quietly turned towards the light, like an unlit lantern finally ready to shine. I woke to the smell of coffee and the faint sound of rainwater dripping from the eaves. For a moment, I didn't remember where I was. Then I saw the faded wallpaper, the soft light spilling through the curtains, and the shape of the armchair across from me. And it all came back. Mr. Hartley's house. The storm. The candlelight. Everything we'd said. I blinked, sitting up slowly on the couch. The blanket he'd given me was still draped across my legs, warm and faintly scented of cedar, and something I couldn't quite name. Something that reminded me of him. My heart beat faster, though there was no reason it should. Nothing had happened, not really. And yet, somehow, everything had. From the kitchen came the faint clink of a mug. "Morning," Hartley called, his voice calm, composed, as if the night before had been just another passing storm. "Morning," I managed, running a hand through my hair. "What time is it?" "7:30. You slept through the worst of it," I stretched, glancing toward the window. The sky had cleared, washed pale and pink with dawn. The garden glistened under the early light, the fog thinning like breath on glass. Everything looked newer somehow, as though the night had rinsed the world clean. When Hartley appeared with 2 mugs, I found myself sitting straighter. He was wearing a thick jumper and a tired smile, his hair still slightly damp from what must have been a quick wash. "Thanks," I said, as he handed me a cup. "Milk, no sugar," he said. Took a guess, he'd remembered. I didn't even recall telling him that. I took a sip. The silence between us was gentle, not strained, though under it lay something unspoken, a fragile understanding neither of us quite knew how to approach. "How'd you sleep?" he asked eventually. "Better than I thought I would," I said with a nervous laugh. "Didn't think your couch would be so comfortable." "It's terrible," he said, smiling faintly. "But I'm glad it fooled you for one night." That small, easy humor settled the air. I glanced around the living room. The candles burnt down to puddles of wax, a trail of muddy footprints near the door, a few leaves blown in by the wind. It looked like a memory already. Something delicate, half-dreamt. "I should probably help you clean up," I said, setting the mug down. "You don't have to," he replied. "I want to." So I did. We worked side by side for a while, gathering candle stubs, wiping down the table, picking up bits of debris. The rain had stopped completely now, and the morning light moved softly through the window panes, gilding the room in faint gold. At one point, our hands brushed as we reached for the same candle holder. Just a fleeting touch, skin against skin, but it lingered in my chest, warm and certain, like the echo of something that hadn't yet found words. We both froze for half a second, then smiled awkwardly, neither pulling away nor leaning in. Just understanding, he broke the silence first. "You probably have plans today. Proper Halloween business." "Not really," I said. "The lads wanted to go to some party, but I don't think I'm in the mood." Hartley glanced at me, and there was something soft in his expression. "Strange night, wasn't it?" "Yeah," I let out a slow breath. Not quite how I thought it'd go. Me neither. For a while we stood there, both pretending to be more interested in tidying than in the conversation itself. But the quiet wasn't awkward anymore. It felt safe. When the house was more or less back in order, I turned to him. "Listen, about last night." He raised an eyebrow, half amused, half wary. You don't owe me any explanations, Jamie. I know, I said, but I want to say something anyway. He waited. I kept thinking about why I came over. That stupid prank. I laughed under my breath. I was just bored. And now, I don't even know what that was all about. But I'm glad it went wrong. Hartley smiled, small and real. Are you? Yeah. My throat felt tight, because I think I saw more of myself last night than I ever expected to. He didn't answer right away, but the look in his eyes told me he understood. Outside, the first real sunlight of morning began to push through the clouds, scattering across the wet pavement and the leaves still clinging to the trees. It painted his face in pale gold, and for a second, I thought about how easy it would be to stay, to keep talking, to let the morning stretch just a little longer. But instead, I said softly, I should probably head back. He nodded, his expression steady but gentle. Of course. I picked up my jacket from the back of the chair, and the mask, still lying on the table beside it. The cheap plastic looked almost silly now, cracked near the edge where I'd fallen in the garden. I turned it over in my hands for a moment. Guess I won't be needing this anymore, I said quietly. Hartley watched me, his lips curving into the faintest smile. Maybe it did its job. Helped you see what was underneath. I looked at him then, really looked. And for once I didn't feel uncertain. I didn't feel like I was pretending. Maybe we could talk again sometime, I said. The words came out tentative, but honest. Hartley's smile deepened, warm and unguarded. I'd like that very much. There was nothing more to say. I stepped outside into the morning air. It was cool and sharp, carrying the clean scent of rain and earth. The world looked softer than it had the night before, as if every edge had been sanded smooth. Behind me, I heard the quiet click of Hartley's door closing. Not final, just gentle. Like a pause, not an ending. I walked down the path, the mask still in my hand. At the corner, I hesitated, then tossed it gently into the bin by the gate. No more tricks. The light was growing stronger now, spilling across the quiet street, touching every window and rooftop. I shoved my hands in my pockets and started walking, not sure where I was headed, but certain of one thing. Whatever last night had been, mistake or miracle, it had changed something in me. And for the first time in a long while, that change didn't scare me. It felt like the beginning of something real. If you enjoyed this Halloween story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next one. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in his place that night? Would you have stayed and talked? Or walked away before things got too real? I'd love to hear your thoughts.